I like to think of gluten as fingers. Fingers that stretch out, grab onto one another, and hold tight. High gluten flour are 5 fingers. Bread flour are 4. All-purpose flour are 3. Pastry flour are 2. And cake flour is 1. And think about this. Those gluten proteins that are like fingers are just in the flour. They don't do a thing until you add water to them. So when you begin to make a pie dough, a pastry dough, as you blend the cold particles of butter with the flour is just coating the butter. As the butter is paddled, it gets smaller and smaller. If there are big pieces, you're going to have a flaky crust. If you keep going and the pieces get small like a pea or even smaller, you'll have a mealy dough. Flaky is chunky, mealy feels mealy. And the minute you add the water, the gluten unfurls and starts to connect. Agitation is the other ingredient you need to develop gluten. So you're not developing gluten necessarily when you're blending the flour and the butter. And just because a recipe says a certain amount of water doesn't mean you add it all. You add about 60%. Blend for just a moment and then check to see where you are. Because if the dough is coming together, you stop. If you keep going, you haven't really overworked the gluten. You've ruined the dough. You've made it almost like a creamed product, and it's just going to be incredibly tough. Once the dough is out of the bowl and you start to bring it together and roll it and place it in a pie pan, you may overwork it. Your warm hands may soften the butter, but resting it allows the gluten to relax again. So I move around from one dough project to the next, and you can see that that very firm, cold, inflexible dough is softening, and it's starting to allow me to drop it into the pan. And even if I push the dough into the corners, it's not going to shrink during baking because I'm going to wait and then let it drop in a little bit more before I chill the dough and then bake it. Shrinkage occurs because you don't account for the gluten being agitated, and then when you fill it and bake it, it shrinks, which is what gluten does. It tightens up and relaxes. And it does that over and over again, just like bread does. So gather all of your ingredients, put the recipe away, and watch the dough. Don't walk away from the process. Go very slow, step by step, and build an internal intuition.